Hello, greetings. Welcome to Attaining the Second Cognition. This is Doug Michael. My website, www.dougmichaeltruth.com. I'd like to give a big thank you to all my new subscribers and to all my subscribers that have been listening to these videos. It's great to be spending time again with you today, ladies and gentlemen. We've been receiving a lot of inquiry into when our collaborative website will be up. It's in its final stages of construction, so I would estimate that within the next couple of weeks it will be up and running, and it's designed to be an educational platform to delve more deeply into the ideas of the concepts that we've been presenting in these public videos. So it should be very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, the road to the second cognition is fraught with many misperceptions and ideas, and probably the most confusing ideas are those about heightened awareness. In order to help clarify many of these misperceptions and provide some guidance for understanding, the topic of this video is heightened awareness compared to perceptual advancement. Regardless of where one may start on the road to the second cognition, all of us start from the position of the ego ruling our consciousness. This is a rule that, unfortunately, has no exception. Because of our individual cultural indoctrinations, we all perceive the world through the lens of the ego. It is the ego that controls all of our perceptions in the first cognition. The more that the consortium lies to our species and the more we believe these lies, the more our perception is controlled by what they feed us as our presumed truths. These presumed truths, whether they are ingrained from birth by our parents through religious and cultural indoctrination, or whether they are the fabricated truths forced down our throats through the indoctrination mills called schools, set the stage of each individual's perception of reality. Not to mention constant reinforcement through mass media and the steady drip feed method of religious indoctrination willingly embraced by so many. Once we are fully indoctrinated into the ego world, we each have a set of cognitive filters established in our minds by our own egos, and any information we are faced with has to pass through these cognitive filters for the ego program to reach any conclusions on how it chooses to interpret that information. Once we are fully indoctrinated into the first cognition world of perception, it becomes the only source for interpreting anything and everything, for there is presently no alternative available through which we can filter that information in a different manner than the first cognition allows. We become trapped, and no matter what kind of information we're provided, it all passes through that first cognition filter of ego acceptance and interpretation. Using the example of a person discovering the conspiratorial truth of our history, one starts to have their interpretation of the world challenged because it goes against the grain of accepted indoctrination. The individual becomes more aware of the shit that's happening in the world around them, and their awareness starts to shift away from the standard herd mentality. Although they have had their awareness become more acute and it becomes broader, they still interpret the information according to their own first cognition filters of interpretation. This gathering of more historical facts that paints the picture of the world with a broader brush does alter our perception of the world around us, allowing us to see a bigger picture, but we still interpret these perceptions wearing first cognition glasses. So although we have become more aware and our perception of the world has changed, we still view it according to our first cognition filters of interpretation. Each of us brings a certain amount of first cognition baggage to the table when we are seeking an advanced state of perceptual awareness. Many people mistakenly believe that because they have gained a broader sense of perceiving the world and because they can now see a bigger picture from the first cognition point of view, that this constitutes advancing consciousness. I don't want to be overly harsh in revealing this, but increasing first cognition awareness is not the same as advancing cognitive perceptual awareness, although one can, and often does, lead to the other. As we have noted in previous videos, we have all been trained and indoctrinated to think in certain ways, and everyone has a catalog of inventoried facts within their minds. These collections of stored facts are our cognitive boxes. While operating in the first cognition, even as we progress in our gathering of facts, we still shove everything we interpret into preconceived boxes of first cognition acceptance. When we find that the information we are faced with challenges what we had in these boxes before, then we start another box to start putting all the new facts into, yet we still interpret this new information using the old system of sorting inventoried information and interpreting these facts using the same first cognition rules, that we always have. At this point in our development, we are perceiving the world from a different and broader perspective than we did before, but we are still interpreting these pieces of information in the same manner that we did all of our life. Yes, we have raised our awareness to become more apprised of the bullshit in the world, but we continue to translate this information using the single method of first cognition reckoning. We are simply increasing our inventories with a larger collection of facts than we did before, but we are still using the same interpretive tools to analyze the new data and come to terms with it within our minds. Many people reach the erroneous conclusion that because they can see a larger picture of the world and that their broader perception of that world through heightened awareness means that their consciousness is expanding. This means that their perception of the first cognition world is expanding, but it is still being interpreted from a first cognition system of perceptual awareness. Now I want to take a different track and use Reiki and its usage to illustrate how first cognition interpretations can lead to erroneous conclusions, especially when they are coupled with consortium dogmas. I'm going to provide some explanations about Reiki energies that Endall shared in his book Operator's Manual for the True Spirit Warrior in order to better explain the first cognition system of interpretation. And again, ladies and gentlemen, we're not picking on Reiki practitioners or people that have followed their pursuit in energy work, okay? But what we are illustrating is the fact that damn near everything that the New Age has gotten its hands on has been twisted under the guise of theosophy in collusion with its Fabian cohorts, and that is the reality of the situation whether you like it or not. Okay? So we are not picking on individuals that engage in these practices. What we have been attempting to do with this series of 30 plus videos or whatever it is now is to demystify a lot of this shit that theosophy has tainted for its own ends. Okay? So please bear that in mind. Radio frequencies on this planet operate in what we call a bandwidth. In radio, bandwidth is a term used to measure a range of frequencies. For example, in radio, we have the AM bandwidth and the FM bandwidth. Each of these separate forms of bandwidth contain all the frequency ranges that you find present on the radio dial, but regardless of the varying channels within each bandwidth, they are all still within the AM or FM bandwidth of measure. Each dimensional frequency also covers specific bandwidths. In 3D, just as with the variances in the AM and FM dials, we have certain individual frequencies contained in the 3D bandwidth range. In order for these inorganic energy lures to deceive people into believing they are tapping into some form of higher level energy, such as the energies used in Reiki, we only need to understand that the vast majority of humans on this planet are operating at the lowest frequencies of the 3D bandwidth. When the inorganics devised their energy lures, all they did was take energies within the 3D bandwidth from a bit higher 3D frequency that most humans operating at the lower end of the 3D range didn't normally feel and hook these energies to their false spiritual doctrine programs. When people feel these higher frequency energies that are still part of the 3D bandwidth, the receiver of the energy is convinced that they are tapping into some form of mystical higher dimensional type of energy. The fact is that they are only feeling higher level 3D frequency energies that normally go beyond the receptivity frequency of most humans. The reason so many people can feel these energies is strictly because they are still within the overall 3D bandwidth, but at just a bit more elevated frequency level above so-called human normal. As example, say that humans are operating at 92.5 of the 3D frequency band. When these energies like Reiki are presented, that dial is moved from 92.5 to say 96.4. It is still within the overall 3D frequency bandwidth, only at a higher level of individual frequency within that bandwidth, and the slight elevation of frequency receptivity gives one this feeling of elevated energy. It is through manipulating this minor adjustment of the 3D frequencies where humans can feel higher frequency 3D energies coupled with the fabricated doctrines of the inorganic beings that humans are deceived into believing that they are tapping into other dimensional frequencies when in fact they are only accessing higher level 3D energies. Once people feel these higher level 3D energies coupled with the doctrinal bullshit peddled by the inorganics, a human becomes totally convinced that they are now cosmically attuned to the higher dimensions. It is this type of energy manipulation that has so many people on the planet convinced that they are doing some kind of great mystical work, when in fact they are only playing with and more firmly harnessing others into the 3D bandwidth by practicing their energy healings. With this explanation in hand, we can see how these energies are misinterpreted through the first cognition system of interpretation of the believers combined with New Age dogma. When you put these two factors together, then people believe they are experiencing fifth dimensional energies because they've been told that by others. The first cognition filter of belief has accepted the idea that these energies must be 5D energies because the New Age theosophical doctrines say so, and the ego accepts this dogma as fact, using its first cognition form of interpretation to reach this erroneous conclusion. Yes, these practitioners can feel and perceive these energies, but the conclusions they reach in regard to them passes through their first cognition filter of belief and doctrinal acceptance to make them believe their perception is something it's not. There are most likely millions of ground crew members around the planet who have been feeling the energies associated with the cosmic wave over the past 2 to 3 decades, but what they perceive these energies to be is processed through their own first cognition filter, and in many cases people believe these are so-called symptoms of ascension, another theosophical New Age misinterpretation. When people make these erroneous assumptions, they don't realize that they are only going through that first cognition process of filtering and interpreting what these energies mean and filing their conclusions in just one more first cognition box, which has naturally been built by the inorganic doctrinaires to misguide people into reaching these highly questionable conclusions. The folks who are experiencing these energies settle on a pre-packaged explanation about these energies designed to prevent them from knowing what they really are or what they portend for humanity if utilized and understood correctly. Folks who are experiencing these energies and the physical symptomatology associated with them have heightened awareness in regard to their experiencing these symptoms, but how they are interpreting them through their first cognition filter, coupled with erroneous conclusions about ascension, prevents them from genuinely expanding their perceptual awareness beyond accepting the doctrine of ascension. They are putting something potentially huge and valuable to their cognitive advancement into a small first cognition box, and are therefore not expanding their perceptual awareness by seeking greater understanding about these energetic experiences. They are taking what they are experiencing and stuffing its interpretation into an acceptable first cognition box specifically designed by the consortium as nothing more than another cognitive trap. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the ego does and how it functions. Imagine a small card catalog in a huge library. Okay, the ego inventories things in that card catalog, places it into nice little neat boxes, but yet it thinks it's the entire library. And this is what we have to get our heads around to while we are, traversing the abyss into second cognition. Being indoctrinated in the first cognition, as we all have been, we all tend to take the words of presumed authorities far too seriously. This is particularly handicapping when we allow alleged spiritual teachers or masters to tell us what our experiences are supposed to mean, rather than move beyond these contrived explanations and reach our own conclusions. Operating in the first cognition, we are all seeking answers, but more people seem to be seeking answers than are asking questions. Or if they do ask questions, they are seeking answers that they can fit into their first cognition boxes of perceptual awareness. The road to the second cognition is about asking questions, lots and lots of questions. Yes, we are all looking for answers, but all of us have fallen prey to listening to and accepting answers provided by people who, for the most part, don't know any more than you do, particularly where cognitive advancement is concerned. Anyone who has been on the road to cognitive advancement for any length of time is fully aware that the so-called spiritual authorities have been misguiding humanity for thousands of years, with very few exceptions. The ones who were genuine were usually murdered or marginalized in some way, or their teachings twisted and bastardized to create some fucking mind control religion, or whatever. Given all the information we have shared about the inorganic beings in our latest videos, then it is easily understood how this has come about. Those who have read the works of the New Age gurus, or even the old religious traditional gurus, find their alleged teachings filled with erroneous blanket statements like we are all part of a grand, collective, cosmic oneness, as just one glaring example. Because this particular spiritual lie has been spewed out by the allies of the inorganics for thousands of years, and it has been repeated ad infinitum from generation to generation by knowing spiritual prevaricators as well as malinformed multitudes who buy into this belief, the lie continues to be perpetuated and believed. Such beliefs are nothing more than a yoke on our consciousness. Speaking of yokes, let me digress for a moment and give you another enlightening fact that is not widely reported. Along with the theosophical New Age doctrines, one of the big things being pushed in the modern spiritual arena is yoga. Now, I won't say that yoga is not good exercise if one's limber enough to do it and utilizes it as a form of exercise, but yoga started as a religious practice, and there are probably millions of people worldwide who believe that practicing yoga is going to somehow lead them to enlightenment as a spiritual practice. Now, the literal definition is a Hindu system of philosophy aiming at the mystical union of the self with the Supreme Being in a state of complete awareness and tranquility through certain physical and mental exercises. Now, the origin from Sanskrit means a yoking union, from yunakti, he yokes. For those who don't know, the word yoga directly translates to mean yoke. When we look at the definition of yoke, we find an agency of oppression, subjection, servitude, etc., and something that couples or binds together, a bond or a tie. Now, red flags immediately go up for me when I see the term, the mystical union of the self with the Supreme Being. When you can get your head around the idea that yoga, just like every religious and spiritual tradition on the planet, was created by the inorganic hierarchy, then you realize that yoga, as a spiritual practice, is nothing more than another cognitive yoke designed by the inorganics to lure its followers into just another divine trap of the so-called ascended masters. However, as a form of exercise, it is definitely beneficial as long as the idea that it will automatically bring one, cognitive advancement is put to the side, and this practice of physical maintenance is demystified. If you want confirmation that this practice doesn't hand deliver enlightenment, just consider the case of Bikram Kudri, one of the most successful yogis in the world, who was ordered by the courts recently to pay out over $7 million in damages in a sexual assault case. Several other women have come forward with similar claims. You see, you can be a world-renowned yogi, founder of a unique system recognized globally, and still be a shitty human being, mired within first cognition lures of power. Now, I'm not putting anyone down for practicing this discipline, not at all. I myself have attended several yoga classes, and I found it to be a very beneficial and somewhat grueling form of exercise. I think it's a great way to stay in shape, but it's yet another useful practice that's been co-opted by the New Age and the theosophical and Fabian agents behind it to mislead people into avenues of mysticism, enlightenment, or union with the Supreme Being. In my view, union with the self should be sought, and if this discipline leads one to that union, then more power to you. So, let's get back to heightened awareness compared to perceptual advancement. With the explanation and examples offered in this presentation, then my listeners should see how expanded first cognition awareness is not the same as perceptual advancement. Perceptual advancement occurs when we no longer try to fit everything into a first cognition box of accepted beliefs. Perceptual advancement occurs when these boxes are shaken so hard on their foundations that how you perceived things before is no longer useful when faced with ideas and principles that go beyond those limited cognitive constraints. As these video presentations progress, you're going to be hit with ideas that you have no cognitive box into which you can fit the information. The only way you are going to be able to deal with a lot of this information is to expand your perceptual awareness into regions that the first cognition hasn't gone. You're going to have to literally expand your cognitive horizons in order to start seeing the really big picture called the universe and how it works and how you will be able to grow into it. This won't be accomplished so long as you keep trying to fit this information into small first cognition boxes. Part of advancing your perceptual awareness is founded on the same principles of expanding one's first cognition awareness as explained earlier. It starts with the process of deconstructing how you have been taught to think in order to learn how to perceive beyond first cognition thinking. Through the process of our cultural indoctrination, we have not really been taught to think as much as we have been taught how to think, or more, what to think. This process of being taught what to think and how to think is the foundation we use to figure out where that process of first cognition thinking leads us in reaching our conclusions and then deciding which little ego cognitive box we are going to file any new information within. Part of advancing one's perceptual awareness has strictly to do with our interpretive processes, our personal cognitive filters. I'm going to cite just one small example from personal experience, and that is in regard to the New Paradigm books that I've referenced in many of these presentations lately. When you first read those books, they speak to you on one level, and that is your present level of cognitive understanding. As you work to deconstruct your own ego and revisit the books at a later date, you're going to see things in those messages that you didn't see before because your perceptual awareness has begun to shift. The words on the pages have not changed, so what happened that led you to see things differently than you did the first time you read them? What changed is your perceptual awareness. As you deconstruct the ego and the hampering beliefs the ego insists on maintaining in order to keep its perceptual world in place, you find that you are less bound by those ideas and beliefs than you were before. You have removed part of the blinders from your consciousness, and your perceptual abilities increase because you no longer have the same limited perceptions of the ego to blind you from perceiving things you can't see when viewed from an ego-handicapped point of view. You reach an observational point of perspective, and you grow more removed emotionally. The more you erode your first cognition ego perceptions and beliefs, the more your cognitive abilities increase to perceive things in a different way than you have been indoctrinated to think all your life, provided you don't insist on cognitively functioning the same way you always have. And herein lies the challenge. It truly is a journey into unfamiliar territory. This is why these videos seem to be such an assault on people's egos, because they are. They're designed to help my listeners and subscribers tear down their own cognitive barriers by making these barriers known. The more one can accept the information presented, the more it undercuts the ego and how it controls your thought processes. This is why the road to enlightenment is a destructive process. Every belief, every cognitive box of pigeonholed beliefs is a roadblock to your cognitive and perceptual advancement. Let me offer an allegorical story to illustrate how these videos are designed. And make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, Endall and I and the others involved specifically designed them in this way. For those who are watching these videos seeking solutions to the quest for cognitive advancement, just imagine that you are like Daniel LaRusso, right? Remember that movie, The Karate Kid? I know. Just bear with me, ladies and gentlemen, because it's a point here. So in that movie, The Karate Kid, Daniel went to Mr. Miyagi, right? The sensei or the instructor, to learn karate. And Miyagi agreed to teach him karate, provided that Daniel would help him get some jobs done on his property. Mr. Miyagi worked the dog shit out of Daniel. All the while, Daniel was whining about how he only wanted to learn karate and felt he was being cheated by doing all this work and not getting any karate lessons in compensation, like was agreed upon by the two. Finally, Miyagi got fed up with Daniel's continual whining, belly aching, and showed him how every procedure he had insisted on Daniel using to do certain jobs in a certain manner, he was teaching Daniel karate every step of the way. Using this allegorical example, we are Miyagi to your Daniel LaRusso. You want cognitive advancement and you want the tools to get there, but we keep throwing you all this stuff about the ego, right? And exposing shoddy spiritual beliefs for what they are, just as Miyagi insisted that Daniel do certain tasks certain ways, never realizing that he was being instructed in the how-tos every step of the way. In like kind, every one of these video presentations is a teaching mechanism, no different than those devices Miyagi used to teach Daniel karate. Just as Daniel couldn't perceive what he was being taught, many of my viewers are as ignorant of the process we have been providing, just as Daniel was ignorant of the fact that he was being taught karate. This ignorance is due to the seat of one's perceptual awareness residing firmly in the first cognition. This story elucidates exactly what we mean when trying to illustrate what advanced perceptual awareness entails. From the position of first cognition, these videos appear to be one thing, but from the perspective of advanced perceptual awareness, they are perceived as something completely different. You can increase your awareness and stay fully anchored in the first cognition, but you can't stay in the first cognition and expect to expand your perceptual awareness beyond first cognition reckoning. That only comes when we can remove the cognitive barriers erected by our ego and enforced by the herd mentality and the consortium doctrines designed to keep us firmly roped into their first cognition traps. I realize that these concepts are initially going to be pretty hard to get your head around, ladies and gentlemen, but at the moment, it's the best examples we can offer in regard to providing an explanation that we sincerely desire begets greater understanding to help you on your road to the second cognition and perceptual advancement. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for spending time with me once again and listening to Attaining the Second Cognition. I extend my deepest gratitude and my heartfelt thanks to any and to all who take the time to open their minds, search for the truth, and to push forward in their own cognitive advancement and willful evolution. Once again, thank you so much. This is Doug Michael, and until next time, walk in peace.